It always amazes me how one person can manipulate other people into committing crimes, and no one in that group goes, "What?" I can't stay. Electus Bedeus is Afrikaans for chosen by God. This was a cult established by Cecilia Sting, and in it she managed to rope in 3 other people, and they committed, well, rather, the cult itself was then connected to 11 murders that were committed in Krugersdorp over a 4-year period. Now, these murders really rattled the Krugersdorp community, and this in fact made national headlines. Now, a documentary titled Devilsdorp is based on these murders that took place, and a book, in fact, that was written by journalist Jana Marx, who actually covered the story since the court case began in 2018. It's been grueling to actually be exposed to just how desensitized these 3 people, as well as Cecilia, really, in as far as committing the crimes that they did. I mean, the attention to what they were doing was as a result of the appointment killings that had happened. You know, it was quite bizarre to have people killed in such a short space of time, although there were just 4, but in such a small community like Krugersdorp, that really like raised flags for people and made the community very uncomfortable, you know. But yeah, no, it's really freaky to watch that. Yeah, it is really. You went to school in Krugersdorp.
No, in
Rondiport, which is next to Krugersdorp. So I only imagine, like, what were you feeling when you know, watched all of this?
So it's actually very shocking, you know. Like, I was cringing when I learned that the woman, the old lady, was actually a teacher in one of my neighboring schools.
Hectic.
So it's like, what? So close to home. She could have been my English teacher, for goodness sakes, you know. And like at the same time as I watched it, I was like, ooh, my qualification.
Wow. Yeah.
Hectic. It's hectic, but at the end of the day, you know, I was listening. There's a certain crime series podcast that I've listened to, and they interviewed a psychiatric analyst from former police psychiatric analyst, you know, crime investigative unit, you know, and he was talking about serial murderers. It's like these people, they actually go to work, go to school, do whatever they want during the course of the day. It's not that they plan murders, but they actually it's just a random thing, and they continue with life as normal, you know. That's what really shocks me the most, and it's sad in the sense of for the victims and those which are affected by these crimes, you know. And it's something which, when you look at South Africa, we don't really focus or look too much into serial murderers, you know, and we just think, police have got it. But also even police, like in the docu, one of the colonels, Colonel was got too close with them, you know. He chilled with them, he partied with them. So, man, it's scary.
Yeah,
it's scary.
I get that. I think, you know, among the things that were highlighted, you know, in addition to the fact that these murders took place and just how they were so bizarre, and just also like where they started from, as in what inspired them to actually take place. They also really highlighted, and very well, you know, just the role that police played in that. I think it was very clever of them to use that one detective who literally invested himself in this case, even though he was like close to retiring, you know, like he chose to invest himself into this case, having seen how previous officers had handled the case poorly, you know. And it's quite telling. Also, well, not telling, but it's like a new experience for us, because it's like we don't necessarily have references as far as these kinds of cases are concerned. I mean, a lot of the I guess response, the major response to what was happening was that, no, you know, because they were seeing footage of like this Cecilia lady spitting blood out of her body, her mouth, and they just linked all of that to it's satanic, you know what I mean? But there was nothing particular that they could reference and say, okay, this is really linked to satanic killings.
I think as well, I could say that they're fanatics. They're killing fanatics. Like maybe they found some sort of pleasure in killing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like to say that they were convinced to commit these murders, I'm like, no, but as a human being you have a conscience, and again, looking at this and seeing that this wasn't in any way linked to religion, you know what I mean? It was just this lady just made up things on her own. She made up a satanic cult in the States with kids of Satanists. You know what I mean? There was no sort of proof that these people could rely on to say, okay, we're doing the right thing. They were just listening to somebody and took that. So there was a consciousness that they had in committing these crimes, but they also chose not to exercise their own consciousness.
Yeah, even how they were testifying in court. It kind of tells a lot about who they are as individuals. That's besides the whole spiritual aspect of it, hence I say that they are just fanatics. Like you can't just come out and not even be remorseful about the things you've done. Basically. Like
very blank expressions on their faces, you know what I mean? And for me, just seeing that, I was like, I believe that we're all capable of committing the same crimes that they did, but we choose not to, you know what I mean? Like for us, it's like they don't even need a compelling enough reason to do it. For them, it's just like, oh, okay, so and so needs to die, let's do it.
and it's so abrupt, even.
Like
they oh guys, this is so sad, man.
What do you think though about how it was all put together, how the story was all put together, shown to us? Because it was done in 4 parts. You know what I mean?
It's a lot to watch. And guys, like there wasn't even a lot of dramatization, something that would help me keep me interested in watching for much longer. So it's like when I watch it, pause, I'll come back to this. That's how it kind of felt. But at the end of the day, you could tell that it drags you into it. Like you also get exhausted out of watching it, you become too emotional. It makes you too. Perhaps it's because this case is kind of close to home, but they could have maybe just had some music that was just a bit more upbeat, so that even as I watch it, I would know it would in a way desensitize me.
But why do you want to be desensitized? I feel like that's the point of this thing. It's like, there's certain things that we don't want to confront as a society. The last time that we even paid attention to this case was when it was concluded in 2018, and it happened over like a couple of months as well. So it's like we need to remember that this is something that happened, destroyed so many lives, and could potentially still exist, because we know that there are like Satanist groups that exist, and they're very happy to speak. They're even covered in media, you know what I mean?
My point is to desensitize. I'm actually talking about, from the whole Celia, the entire group of murderers, desensitize in the sense of what justice, yes, they did, it prevailed. Although yes, with the victims they did a good job in terms of making us empathize and sympathize with them. It does build that connection, but at the same time also looking at how police are, how it reflects with the justice system. We shouldn't now become too angry. We need to now look at things as objectively as possible, to say, actually, let's also look at the entire law enforcement without getting too emotional, because when you get too emotional, it might cloud your judgment, with regards to how the principle of policing works. That's what I mean. Instead of I feel angry, I feel sad, I cringe in every moment, I need to think and be like, okay, how could this have been better dealt with, from day one? How could the police have dealt with the ones that tampered with evidence? Instead of me being frustrated and saying, police are useless, but there's a police officer who lost so much out of this case.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I do think that they really did strike a balance between showing those different faces, because again, a documentary, well, not all of them, but their mission was to show everything that happened, because there was so much that happened that not everything could be incorporated into just articles, you know. And that's why Jana Marx then wrote the book. For me, I mean, the use of the timeline was something that I thoroughly enjoyed. Also, the way that they approached it, right? Because in the beginning, we're introduced to the appointment killings, and then we like go back in time. So I think that was a really clever inclusion, or a way, I guess, a visual inclusion in there, because it would have been annoying, I guess, for it to read like a book, like you're watching the documentary and it's like as a book, as in we're starting in 2012 when this happened, and then we're going down the timeline. But I think also it made sense because the time that this cult started to then get attention was because of the appointment killings that happened. Then the discoveries back in time and going forward then started to happen. But to see that these appointment killings were mainly just literally to stroke an ego, not necessarily because they had any sort of sense to them, but just as a way of stroking an ego, was also like, again, you know, the mind of a killer. Nothing is going to make sense to us as somebody who is capable of but chooses not to, you know, because if a killer wants to do something, they're going to do it regardless of who's going to be affected, and whether or not it makes sense to you, you know, it doesn't matter. So it was that for me was like the thing that I really enjoyed about how they put it together. It was very different, and I also like that they used Jana Marx herself to narrate the story for us, you know. It was a different style to I've never seen a documentary done like that before, you know.
You get big names narrating.
No, not even that. Narration, usually you don't even see the person who's narrating the story, you know, but to have her as like literally the glue that pulls the story together was a very different take to it, and of course made sense because she had been covering the story and it's based off of her book. But to just have her as like a prominent glue in the whole story was really interesting. Also, you mentioned the humanized part. I think also including that other journalist who eventually fell in love with the one murderer. I was like, I thought these things only happen in movies, but I think also using that was another, like, adding humanizing him, you know what I mean, because he's the one who was among the first, I guess, to say, you know what, maybe I should just tell the truth, and eventually turn state witness. So I think adding that part of him maybe also played on the fact that he was just an innocent kid, you know, who was roped into this by his mom and essentially not even given a choice. That naivety of a kid. You know, I think that is what we really gotta give credit to. You know, like not all heroes wear capes. Sometimes even the villain is the hero. Yeah, but I obviously don't want to give him too much credit because he benefited quite greatly, you know, find his whatever, then his conscience was like, you know what, do the right thing, you know, families were hurt, and then he decided to turn state witness, even with his sister in the end. But I think telling of the love story that then grew for him between himself and the journalist, the other journalists who covered the story, was quite an interesting and I guess break away from the gruesomeness of what they were doing and what they were involved in. It was very, very interesting.
It was interesting. But overall, how many biltong sticks would you give it?
I would give it 4.5 biltong sticks. How many biltong sticks would you give it?
I agree with you. I'd also give it a 4.5. You know, I think in terms of the message, and also because this kind of a documentary is not what we always see in our country, you know, and it sort of creates, it has created a sense of a new style for doing documentaries in the country, and especially with regards to cases which relate to crime and occults and spirituality, how people mix things up. And this one has created a sense of clarity as to there is fanatic killers, there's serial killers, and there's occult killings, which we pretty much know exist, but we haven't really gotten to really see, you know, or got the story out there to understand and to be aware, you know. Yeah.
Well, if you've also seen Devilsdorp, which I'm sure you have, because it's been the rave of, you know, online critics, but also just people watching generally. If you've also seen it, do let us know what you think about it, about the story, its links to cultism, or it's spotlighting cultism and just, you know, mental or psychological manipulation that takes place within groups, you know, because reality is this could have been any other group, could have been a book clubhouse, you know what I mean. So yeah, just let us know what you think about it. Leave us your comments down below,
and if there's a movie, series or documentary you'd like us to review that features South Africans or Africans in the diaspora, let us know in the comments. I'm Gomo,
and I'm Dumi, and this is the Biltong Review. Thanks for watching.